Okay, dads, let's go ahead and get started. Now, some of you already let me know how uncomfortable you were in last week's meeting. So tonight, we're going to try to respect each other's boundaries. What? Tonight we've also got a guest with us, David. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey guys, I'm David. How many kids do you have, David? None, at least not at the moment. My wife is pregnant, and she should be delivering any day now. It's great.
Super. Great. Who would like to go first? Anyone.
I'll do it.
Perfect. Todd? Yes.
My daughter and I went to the mall, and she said she wanted to take the stairs to the second level. And I said, I don't trust stairs, because they're always up to something.
Todd, I'm sorry that happened. I encourage you to try to resist the urge to make jokes like that.
My turn? Can I go? Okay. Yesterday, actually, my daughter got home and she asked me how my day was. And I said, well, a guy tried to sell me a coffin, but that's the last thing I need.
Oh, shit, that joke is dead on arrival.
This is the last thing I need.
David, how about you?
Oh, I didn't
This is a safe zone. Just jump on in.
Yeah, I guess I'm just scared of being a dad. I'm afraid I'm gonna start telling bad jokes just like my dad.
Well, it might be in our nature. We can fight against it.
Hey, speaking of nature, I tried to catch some fog yesterday. I missed. M-I-S-T.
You're a monster. This is where the boundary is. This is where you are.
Hello? Really? Okay, yeah, no. Yeah, I'll be right there. That was Julie. Her water just broke. I guess the baby finally ran out of womb. I'm gonna be a dad.
Don't you think you should be going?
Oh, yeah.
So I told my wife she drew her eyebrows too high. She seemed surprised.
So anyone who knows me knows I like to share a little humor, and so I was kind of debating whether or not I should throw in a joke. You know, I was thinking about telling a joke about some retired people, but I didn't think that they worked, so I didn't. Try to. It's really hard to pull me out of that mode. But so a little more serious note. What would you do if you inherited $100,000? You know, what would you do with that money? How would you spend it if you found out that you just inherited $100,000? You ever thought about that? You know, if it just all of a sudden it said, Daryl, you inherited $100,000. How would you spend that money?
Because back in the day, I would think about worldly things, but things are changing. I'd probably invest the money in the church.
How about you?
Oh, I have to take it one day at a time.
Yeah, it's one of those things. You know, there's a lot of people that said, "Oh, if I was in this situation, I would do this or I would do that." But a lot of those situations, you never know what you're going to do until you actually get into it. Several years ago, it was probably early to mid 70s. I knew this guy that his dad his dad died, and there was an insurance policy, and he inherited $85,000. And in the mid-70s, that was a lot of money. You know, I remember him, buying a new truck. He bought a couple dirt bikes, and he rode his dirt bike a lot. You know, it wasn't really street legal, but he rode a lot on the streets, and he spent a lot of money. He told me he used to go to the bank and would just draw out $300 or $400 at a time. You know, back in those days, $300 or $400 was a lot of times, or probably a lot more than people were making at the time. So he was doing really good. But pretty soon all that money went away, and at the end, it wasn't too many years later, maybe 4 or 5 years later, he didn't have anything. He was driving an old beat up car, and he had really nothing to show for all that money that he went through. So today we're gonna look at a man in the Bible and see how he spent his money that he inherited. We'll see if there's anything that you have in common with him, and we'll see if what he spent his money on should have got him disowned by his family. So we're gonna look at Luke 15. It's really the whole chapter is really all tied together. It's really one really chunk. Even though there's three main things. A lot of times, if you look at the chapter, it'll say lost sheep, lost coin, lost son. So I'm gonna try to help you remember that. So anytime you hear of Luke 15, you're gonna remember lost sheep, lost coin, lost son. So there's so many things in the Bible, and if we don't really try to remember those, we'll tend to forget. So if your mind thinks in pictures, so I'm gonna kind of put it all together in like a little story, so this will help you every time you think about Luke 15. You don't think of this little story. Now Luke was turning 15 years old. It was his 15th birthday, so he's going to have this birthday party in this mountainous region, and there's this table right on the edge of a cliff. So he's having his birthday party right, like there's a big cliff, and he's right underneath there. He's got this cake with 15 candles, and they're getting ready to sing happy birthday to him, but up on the top there's a shepherd grazing his sheep. And all of a sudden, the sheep falls down on the table right onto his birthday cake that has 15 candles. And when the sheep hits the table, it throws this expensive coin that somebody gave him off the table, and it starts rolling down the hill. Luke jumps up and starts to run after it. He tumbles, and both him and the coin roll out of sight. So when you think of Luke 15, think of lost sheep, lost coin, lost son. Okay? So we're going to jump in at verse 1. Okay. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of the religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. So Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 in the wilderness and go to search for the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. When he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." In the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. And my understanding is that these coins were, that the example he was using, these coins were worth like a day's wages. So, suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Won't she light a lamp and sweep the entire house and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she will call her friends and neighbors and say, "Rejoice with me because I have found my lost coin." In the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels when even one sinner repents. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate now before you die." So the father agreed to divide his wealth between his 2 sons. Now I need to stop here and fill in some background information about Jewish culture. In Jewish culture, they practice what they call patriarchal living. And a patriarch is really just a head of a household or head of a tribe. And that patriarch would take care of the whole family. It was almost like he was a head of this big business, and he was responsible for taking care of all the needs of the people in his household. So the idea was to just continue to grow your business, so you'd have enough wealth to support all the family members that came in. So it kind of reminds me of several years ago. I used to work at a machine shop, and the guy that owned the machine shop bought this building next door that used to have a trucking company, and then he brought his son down from the Chicagoland area to run this business that went in there. And the son that came down from Chicago, started working that business, and a couple years later, this guy's other son took over the tool and die business. And after a few short years, the tool and die business was about ready to go out of business because his son was not doing a good job, and the son with the other building, he was doing good, so he bought his other brother out. Well, I went, had an opportunity to go back there, which would have been like 42 years later, and I didn't even recognize this place when I got there, because the building had been added onto several times, and now the 2 buildings were connected. So the one son, he did a great job of building the business. I went in there. There was lots of machines. Like I say, it was totally different. It was a lot bigger. There's a lot more machines. He was supporting a lot more people. He needed a lot more people to do the work. So there was a lot more people that had jobs. And the point I'm making here is that was kind of the exact same thing that the patriarch was supposed to do, because the family was going to grow, so he had to make sure that he continued to grow the business. Because the kids would get married, and every time a son would get married, he would go to his father's house, and he would build a small house or a big room onto his house, so the father's house would continue to grow. And if we go to John chapter 14, Jesus uses this example when he's talking to his disciples, starting at verse 2. Okay. There's more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, I would have told you that if this were not so, would I have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you. When everything is ready, I will come and go. I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am. Now this was a picture that was very common in Jewish culture. The sons knew that he was referring to, okay, when we were going to get married, he'd go and build a house onto his father's house. You know, it was a place for he and his bride to live, and he would, you know, that would make a place for them. So the family would always grow, and then after the son got married, they would have children. The family would grow more and more, and some of these households were huge. And to kind of illustrate that, let's jump over to Genesis 13, starting in verse 1. So Abram left. Now, you know, this whole family thing started with Abram, whose name was changed to Abraham. At verse 1. So Abram left Egypt and traveled north into the Negev, along with his wife and Lot, and all that they owned. Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and gold. So he was very rich. From the Negev, they continued traveling by stages toward Bethel, and they pitched their tents between Bethel and Ai, where they had camped before. This was the same place where Abram had built the altar, and there he worshipped the Lord again. Lot, who was traveling with Abram, had also become very wealthy, with flocks of sheep, goats, herds of cattle, and many tents. Now, many tents is an important part in that verse, so remember that for just a minute. But the land could not support both Abram and Lot with their flocks and herds living so close together. So disputes broke out between the herdsmen of Abram and Lot. At that time, the Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land. So what do you think the definition of very rich was? You know, you think of people back then, you know, when you think of now, you think of these very rich people having, you know, really expensive vehicles and maybe big mansions and you know, have everything that they want like that. But it said that Abram was very rich, and his nephew Lot was very wealthy also. So to kind of help us understand this a little bit, let's jump to Genesis 14. We're just going to read one verse just to give you a little glimpse of what I'm talking about here. When Abram heard that his nephew Lot had been captured, he mobilized the 318 trained men who had been born into his household. Then he pursued Chedorlaomer's army until he caught up with them at Dan. Now both of these guys had lots of animals, and they had to spread out because the grass wasn't growing enough to feed all the animals. So that it was a huge area that they had to use because of the animals. So they ended up splitting up and moving farther away. And this war broke out between a bunch of these kings. And some of the fighting men were in the area where Lot was, so they captured him. But one of the guys got away and came and told Abram. So Abram, he gets his 318 trained fighting men to go get Lot, you know, and all of his possessions, you know, because that's his family, you know, it's his nephew. So. You know, long story short, he goes and actually catches up with them. He brings them back, and is able to rescue Lot, and they keep on going. So this patriarchal living, 318 men born into your household. Just think there had to been women and fathers, and I'm sure there were girls that were born also, right? So when it said that Lot was wealthy and had many tents, just think of how many tents there would have had to been just to support all these people that they had, these hired hands and family members that were working all this. So there was a lot of people, and some of these things were really, really big. And what happened when the patriarch died, the firstborn son, the oldest son, would take over the family business. So that was just, it wasn't any question. Nobody would say, well, the younger one, he's a better businessman or anything like that. It was all about the firstborn son taking over, and he would like inherit most of the wealth because he had all these people and animals and things he had to take care of. So he got the big chunk of the wealth, and if somebody else wanted to go, leave that household, maybe there was some reason that one of the sons would want to go and start his own family, on his own. So he would be entitled to a smaller portion. But when these households are so big, it's possible that even a younger son, even somebody else that wasn't the firstborn, could have gotten a chunk of money equivalent to like $100,000. So in our story, back to Luke 15, starting at verse 12, it says, the younger son told his father, I want my share of the estate before you die. So the father agreed to divide the wealth between his sons. Now we can tell a lot about this younger son just by the first two words. He says, I want. One translation says, give me. It's all about me. I'm ready to get away from this family. He said, I want to go out and do all those things that I was always told never to do. So now I have plenty of money to do it. And it could have been that he was jealous of his brother. And even just having a younger son, in this culture, telling his dad he wants his part of the money before his father's dead, that's like saying, I wish you were already dead. So this is really just total rebellion on the younger son's part. And it could be that the younger son was just jealous, because the younger son was never going to be in a position of authority. He was always going to have to listen to his younger brother, do whatever he said. He's never going to be the boss man. So I think there was maybe just a lot of jealousy there, and something happens whenever you turn away from the Father. It's like the sinful nature will carry you down the wrong path. And kind of to illustrate that, let's jump over to Galatians 5, starting at verse 19. It says, when you follow the desires of your sinful nature, the results are very clear. Sexual immorality, impurity, lustful pleasures, idolatry, sorcery, hostility, quarreling, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambition, dissension, division, envy, drunkenness, wild parties, and other sins like these. Let me tell you again, as I have before, that anyone living that sort of life will not inherit the kingdom of God. Let me look at that list one more time. It says sexual immorality. You know, that's really rampant in our world today, even in the church. You know, there's people that think, oh, there's nothing wrong with this or that the Bible is calling sexually immoral. Or impurity, there's lots of impurity, lustful pleasures. I mean, that's like a sermon on its own. Idolatry, sorcery, there's probably a lot more of that going on than we really know. Hostility, it seems like everybody is very hostile these days. You know, it just doesn't take it doesn't take much for somebody to just fly off the handle. You know, quarreling, it's almost like some people aren't happy unless they're quarreling or arguing with you. Jealousy, outbursts of anger, you know, just a lot of that. I'm sure Nick and Steve see a lot of that around the Dream Center. Selfish ambition, dissension, division. The devil wants to divide you, but God wants us all to be in unity. You know, drunkenness. You know, that's another big issue. I'd like to maybe sometime speak to that issue or speak to what the Bible has to say, you know, about social drinking. You know, wild parties. You know, it says that anyone living that sort of life will not inherit the kingdom of God. So in just a few minutes, I'm going to give you an opportunity to, if you've never received Christ, to take that step. And if there's some other things in your life that's really holding you back or is going to keep you from inheriting eternal life, I'm going to give you an opportunity to make that right with God. Let's jump back to verse 12. So the younger son told his father, I want my share of the estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide the wealth between his sons. A few days later, the younger son packed all of his belongings and moved to a distant land. And there he wasted all of his money on wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. Now, if you know anything about the Jews, they don't have anything to do with pigs because pigs are unclean animals. So this is like one of the lowest things that you could put on a Jew, you know, having to go in and feed the pigs. Verse 16. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. See, in the Jewish culture, if there was a son that took his part of the inheritance and went out and squandered it, and then tried to return home, he wasn't considered part of the family, because they would disassociate people. It would disassociate from people that were considered sinful, and they considered that doing something like that very sinful. If you weren't following after God, if you weren't keeping the law, they would disassociate themselves with you. If you were even a son, they would disown you, and your only hope was to come back as a hired servant. That was the only hope. You were never entitled to sonship anymore. And after he came to his senses, it says that even my father's hired servants had food enough to spare. You know, it doesn't say that they had food enough to eat. It said they had food enough to spare, so there was always extra in the household. There was always plenty to eat, and there was no worries. and it's this sin. Your sin will separate you from the Father. It'll hurt that relationship. It'll hurt any relationship you have with others. And but this is a great picture of being reconciled back to the Father. You know, when he finally comes to his senses, he says, okay, I'm gonna go back to my Father. I'm gonna repent and make this all right, and at least just be a servant, so that all my needs will be taken care of. You know, I'll have a place to stay, and everything will be taken care of. Verse 15 or verse 20. So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long ways off, his father saw him coming. So God's always watching, waiting for us to come back to him. He's desiring us to have this fellowship, this relationship, a loving relationship with him. So he's just waiting for us. He desires for us to come back if we ever stray away, or if we've never come to him to begin with. It says, filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son. Now, in Jewish culture, older men didn't run. It was undignified. So Jesus is really preaching to these Pharisees, you know, because they understand all this Jewish culture and the law, and they grew up learning these different parables, and this parable wasn't supposed to end this way, and it was just totally taking a different twist. Back to verse 20, it says, so he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. The son knew how this parable was supposed to end. He knew that he couldn't come back as a son, but his only hope was that he would take him back as just a hired servant. And if you go back to verse 1, it says, tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of the religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. So this was all about association with sinful people. You know, in Jewish culture, the religious people didn't associate with sinners. This was just something that they wouldn't do, and Jesus starts going. You know, basically what he's saying is you know, here you will leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one sheep that's wandered off, because an animal is so important to you. You know, this is really important to you, and then when you finally find it, you bring it back, you know, restore it with the flock, and then you get home and you say, oh, you know, celebrate with me, you know, rejoice with me because I found my lost sheep, this animal who you're so concerned about. Or if you lose some money, you know, you're all concerned about that coin you lost. You'll do whatever it takes to find it. You know, and then you're all excited and say, oh, come rejoice with me. You know, tell all your friends and neighbors, come rejoice with me because I found the little bit of money I lost. But when it comes to a human life, you know, someone that's made in God's image, you're not even concerned about them. You're ready to disown them and get them out of your life. You know, your own son, you just throw him out like he's trash. You know, and the Pharisees were just, and teachers of the law, they were just missing it. You know, there was no love in their heart, and God was showing them this. You know, he says, But your heavenly, your heavenly Father is ready to restore that relationship. Even if you stray off, or if you never come to Him, He has so much love in His heart. He desires for you to come to Him, and restore that relationship, and you can experience His love. It's all about the relationship with the Father and experiencing His love. It's like verse 22. But his father said to the servants, "Quickly, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet." So he, the picture really is he didn't have any shoes. He spent all of his money. His clothes were probably old and dirty, and so by the time he got back, because he went to a distant land, it took him a long time to get back. So he's saying, get this guy cleaned up, give him some shoes, give him some new clothes, and kill the fatted calf, the calf that we've been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast. For this son of mine was dead, and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now is found. So the party began. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house. And he asked one of the servants, "Well, what's going on?" "Your brother is back," he was told, "and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return." The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him. Remember verse 2 that it said that these Pharisees and teachers of the law were angry. They were complaining because he was associating with sinners. And the younger brother is really just an example of what was in the Pharisees' heart. These religious people, what was really in their heart. There was no love. God wanted them to have love in His heart. Jesus was trying to explain that to them and show them through this parable. That the Father has love and compassion for them. Verse 29. But he replied, "All these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time you never gave me even a young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fatted calf." His father said to him, "Look, dear son, you have always stayed with me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he's found." God sent His Son to the world to seek and to search for the lost. Luke 19:10 says, "For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost." Let me ask you a question. If you went home tonight and laid your head on the pillow and breathed out your last, where would you spend eternity? There's a lot of people deceived into thinking that they're going to get into heaven by their own goodness. But, the Bible tells us that Christ is coming back for a bride without spot or wrinkle. So we need to get rid of sin before sin gets rid of us. There is a heaven to gain and a hell to shun. You don't have to go to a devil's hell because 2,000 years ago, Christ died to pay the penalty for your sin. Your sin and my sin. Okay? You may have come in one way, but today you can leave in a different way. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about getting your heart right with God, getting your heart one with God, so that He can show you His love, because He loves you. He's an extravagant Father. Right? His love is extravagant. You know, in this parable, the prodigal son, prodigal really means extravagant or lavish, like someone who will spend everything that they have without any worries about where their other money is going to come from. And the father is kind of like the same with love. He's ready to pour out His love onto you and let you receive that. He desires for you to have a loving relationship with Him, and He wants you to experience love in a way that you've never experienced it before. So I'm gonna ask you all to stand, and I'm gonna